Hey guys, I'm back. And this is a better angle. So I did not realize you had a real good angle. But look, it's your girl Lillie Mae. Thank you for coming back once again and rocking with me. So definitely want to restart this conversation. And in this conversation, once again, we are talking about communication. And if you look in the caption, you'll see that the title is communication. 80% is nonverbal and 20% is verbal. The 80 is quantified, not qualified. All right. So basically what that means is if we're only paying attention to the nonverbal, then we're going to miss the most important content, which is what's coming out of the speaker's mouth. And so let me just reintroduce myself, and I want to know who's rocking with me. So if this is your first time going live with me, I want you to put the number 1 up. All right. If this is your second time rocking with me, I want you to put your deuces up. And if this is your third or fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th, 20th, 100th time rocking with me, I want you to wave and also give me your email address so that I can keep in contact with you guys. And if you have any questions or concerns, I can provide you with information as well. So let's look at this. Let's look at the 80%. All right. Let's look at communication being 80% nonverbal and 20% verbal. And let me help you understand why I said the 80 is quantified and not qualified. This is important. It's important for you to understand that in these United States of America, 1% of the population hold 97 to 99% of the wealth and power. Listen to that again. 1% of the population holds 97 to 99% of wealth and power. Why is that important with what I'm talking about? It's important because of this here. We focus so much on nonverbal communication and avoiding communication that we forget that little 20% of verbal communication is the most important, because that content is very, very important. So nonverbal communication, your posture, your eye contact, your body language, whatever. Yes, that is important, because someone can say, I love you. And if their mouth is turned up, you're going to know it's not real. But if someone says, I love you, you know that it's real, right? All right. We need to focus on that 20%. And so this live is going to basically talk about the 80-20 rule relative to communication. And then in the weeks to come, I'm going to talk to you more about substance and effective communication. And I'm going to talk to you about healthy communication, because the reality is we cannot set boundaries, which I talked to you about in the first video. We cannot ask for forgiveness. We cannot have in-depth, active conversations if we don't know how to communicate. And so I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about what communication looked like for me and why I feel like I'm qualified enough to have this conversation with you guys. So for me, communication is very, 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 very important. You guys already know I'm a talker by nature. However, being a talker and being an effective communicator are two different things. Yes, being a talker and being an effective communicator, two different things. Okay. And so what I'm doing, is I'm typing some information in so you guys will kind of have some key points. Okay. So that's the first thing. Talking is not effective communication. All right. So my story is this. My story is I can talk all day. I can communicate with people and all of that. But when it comes to, before October 21st, when it came to having very in-depth, important conversations, I could not do it with people that were close to me. Could not do it. Did not want to do it. Would get anxiety, would get sick, didn't want to do it, just ran from it. Well, what I learned was avoidance and silence are defense mechanisms. Yes, silence speak loud, but avoidance and silence are defense mechanisms. And so for me, I had to focus on why that was the case and move through that. And so the first thing I want to do tonight is I want to demystify this notion that 80% of communication is nonverbal and it's qualified. It's not qualified. That 80% is large and it's only quantified. The 20% of communication that is verbal is extremely important. I need you to understand that 20% is both quantified and qualified, and it holds a lot of weight. All right. So the first thing I want you to get from this very, very brief live tonight is simply this. 80% of communication is verbal. It's nonverbal. I'm sorry. 80% of communication is nonverbal. All right. 20% of communication is verbal. But the 20% of communication that's verbal is extremely important and it is necessary. It is necessary. And that 20% of communication can save you from heartache. It can save you from disappointment, and it can save you from yourself. And what that simply means is I want you to really think about the conversations that you have with people. And I want you to think about, are these communications and are these conversations healthy? Do you sincerely feel like the communications and conversations that you're having are yielding good results? And if the answer is no, you need to go back and revisit the notion that communication is 80% nonverbal and 20% verbal. Yes, communication is 80% nonverbal and 20% verbal, but what is effective communication? Effective communication requires you to actively listen, focus on the content of what is being stated, and lastly, interpret body language. Y'all got it? And I'm going to type it so to make sure you have it. Yes, communication is 80% non-verbal and 20% verbal. But effective communication requires you to actively listen, focus on the content of what is being said, that's the 20% of verbal, and lastly, interpret the body language. Once again, this is a really, really brief live. I'm your girl, Lillie Mae. I have all of my links in the caption, but I definitely want to call your attention to the Road Less Travel Body Confidence Tour, where we are heavily promoting comprehensive body confidence, which truly emphasizes the importance of physical and mental wellness. Have a great evening, everyone.